Move now to the UK, where Finance Minister Jeremy Hunt today delivered his economic plan to deal with the country's financial crisis. The news from the so-called autumn statement is not good. The highest tax burden since World War II. Energy bills will not be kept as low as had been hoped either. Let's get the details now from our London correspondent, Olly Barratt. Olly, so first of all, talk to us about the taxes. I mean, what is this going to do to people who, we're hearing stories of people who've got jobs and still have to go to food banks to make ends meet?
Yeah, and critics of the government are pointing to exactly that issue. They're saying this is the worst time possible to raise people's taxes when they're already facing a cost of living crisis. They say, these critics, that these measures will just push people further into difficulty and push the economy further into a recession, which the UK Finance Minister Jeremy Hunt acknowledged today is probably already underway. Now, his point of view is that actually the nation's finances need to be put on a more stable footing, and he says that if you do that, then actually the autumn statement, that he's set out today can help tackle inflation, and therefore actually that is the key priority, which is going to make people's lives easier when it comes to their spending powers. But the OBR, the forecasting body that you were mentioning there, which is pointing at that very large tax burden historically over the coming years, is also saying that there is going to be a hit to living standards here in the UK, bigger than there has ever really been seen on record, because of the rising tax burden in conjunction with the inflation that is already there. So a real debate about whether this is the right move at the right time, but Jeremy Hunt insists that you have to get the finances on a stable footing, you have to try and put measures in place to try and address inflation, and that everything else can then flow from there.
So who's going to be hit by these taxes? How much are they?
Well, the highest earners, according to the government, will be hit the hardest. One of the things that the government is doing here is freezing tax thresholds. What that means is that as people earn more, some of that will be just through wage inflation, but also when they get a promotion and they get a pay rise, they'll actually move up the thresholds more quickly and therefore pay more tax earlier than otherwise would have been the case. That will bring more people into higher tax bands more quickly, and that will be a very large revenue earner for the Exchequer, running into the billions and billions of pounds. The government is also fiddling around with the top rate of tax and making sure that more people pay that by bringing it down lower. So again, trying to create a picture that the most wealthy in terms of income tax will be paying the most. Now again, critics of the government say that it won't necessarily work out like that. They point to issues like the very wealthiest in society paying tax in a different way, and saying that the measures outlined today won't target those people in the way that they probably should. But Jeremy Hunt has been trying to insist that he is protecting the most vulnerable. He's also putting up benefits in line with inflation today. So he is saying that the people who need it the most will make sure that their benefit payments continue to go up. He's also announced new payments for vulnerable households to help them deal with the cost of living. So the government's trying to create a picture here of this being targeted at the highest earners. But as I say, critics will say there are still loopholes and changes that are being made that could be put in place to target the very wealthiest in a slightly better way. But that's certainly the way the government's trying to paint it today, at least.
And the heating and the cost of heating your homes, a crucial issue as you head into winter, and the subsidies that everyone was hoping for are not going to be as generous as was expected. If I'm not mistaken, less generous than Liz Truss's plan. Is that right?
Well, there's a lot that is less generous than Liz Truss's plan here, Sally, and actually Jeremy Hunt would say that's absolutely right, because the government and the country can't afford the type of plan that Liz Truss had in place. He mentioned it during his speech in the Commons earlier. He said that you can't just put forward unfunded tax cuts, and you can't also put forward unfunded public spending plans. And so there have been these very difficult decisions on taxes, on spending. And you mentioned energy bills. Essentially what is happening is that the government is not going to keep the energy support that is in place for households at the moment in place as long as would have been the case under Liz Truss's government. Now, the government will very much hope that actually over the course of the next year or so, as this plays out, that energy prices will come down, particularly as we head out of this current winter that we're heading into at the moment. And it will therefore hope that some of that energy support for households isn't as necessary over the next 12 months as it has been over this 12 months and in the period that we are currently in. But if energy prices do continue to stay at very high levels or even spike further, then that is going to mean for many households some difficult periods to come in terms of affording the ability to be able to heat their own homes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for that update. That's our London correspondent, Olly Barratt.